And question 20. For an application with a variable workload that is not time sensitive, which AWS pricing model would be the most cost efficient? So, picking apart the question, we're looking for the most cost efficient solution. Other key clues: a variable workload. It's not on all the time. It's intermittent. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And it's not time sensitive, which is to say I could work on it now, I could work on it later, that's okay. It's not crucial that I complete that task as soon as I can. That combination of capabilities does give us some useful flexibility in choosing how we organize the compute resources for a solution. So, 4 pricing options on the table: on-demand instances, spot instances, reserved instances, and savings plans. Of these two, on-demand and spot best meet the needs of a variable workload. Both on-demand and spot instance pricing is good for situations where I intend to use compute for a little while and I want to have no costs for the time when my compute is not running. By contrast, both reserved instances and savings plans are a good choice when my compute needs are fairly fixed and predictable. If I know that I will need 10 servers for the next year, acquiring those through a savings plan or reserved instance pricing is going to be an economical long-term investment. But what about that other criteria in which we're looking for a pricing model for something that is not time sensitive? The time sensitiveness requirement is essentially asking, do I need to do this right now? Or is it okay to do it at some later point when it's more economical or otherwise favorable to do this particular task? In this case, we're saying that it is the latter, that I can wait to do this at some other time if it's more valuable to do so. And that will push us in the direction of spot instances over on-demand instances. On-demand instance pricing was the original pricing strategy for EC2. You turn on an instance and it's yours until you turn it off, and you pay for it for the time that it's running. It was an industry-changing idea when it landed, but it is still among the most expensive options in EC2. What's important to remember about spot instances is that although they are dramatically cheaper than on-demand, they are an interruptible resource. Spot instances use the surplus hardware that AWS has available on a regular basis. As demand for EC2 instances climbs over time, AWS continues to install new hardware to be able to stay a little bit ahead of that demand curve, and maybe even a lot ahead of that demand curve. The interesting question is, what do they do with that extra hardware that's installed at a given moment that isn't quite yet being used by customers who need reserved instances or savings plans or even on-demand instances? And the answer is they make that extra capacity available as spot instances. But there's always the possibility that a new customer comes along and has big demands above what AWS expected, in which case AWS can reclaim those spot instances and make them available as on-demand instances or as part of reserved instances or savings plans for customers who demand them. AWS will send a 2-minute warning to an instance when it's been selected for termination, when some other customer is ready to pay 100% full price for it as an on-demand instance, and you're using it at 80% off of its full price. The deal with spot instances is you're willing to let that instance go because it's not a time-sensitive workload for you anyway. You can do it again some other time when there is surplus capacity. So, for an application with a variable workload and where that work is not time-sensitive, spot instances are the definitely best option to be able to cost optimize that workload on AWS.